Hey folks, I'm JC, and today we're going to head deep into the jungles of the old world with an overview of an adventure that I wrote for my players, ROAR of the Terroghorger, an adventure that you can grab for free on oneshotadventures.com. ROAR of the Terroghorger is set in the world of the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay game, but there are versions available for old school D&D and GURPS, and so those of you who play other game systems can port it to whatever your favorite is. Now, those of you who aren't familiar with Warhammer's old world, well, it's a lot like Europe in the early Renaissance, but unlike Europe, where peasants only really had to deal with war and plague, folk in the old world have to deal with the insidious forces of chaos infiltrating their society. Mutants, beastmen, orc invasions, and, well, still lots of plague and war. Oh, and Skaven, clans of evil ratmen.
Skaven? Oh, everybody knows they don't exist. Our sewers in the old world are pristine. There's no such thing as ratmen. There isn't, right?
But far over the oceans of the old world is the continent of Lustria, a savage land filled with jungles, swamps, dinosaurs, and fearsome lizard men. Lustria is one of my favorite parts of the old world, and I have a pretty big Warhammer lizard men army to prove it. Most human settlements don't last long in Lustria, but there is one, the port town of New Bekefen. This town was founded 1,000 years ago by a mad vampire lord, Luther Harkon, and it's still ruled by him and his vampire kin today. They're served by tons of undead minions and human slaves alike. New Bekefen has a dark reputation. People know that no one lives there voluntarily and that those undead princes roam freely. Some even call the town the Larder because there are enough mortals there to feed the vampires for years to come. And in ROAR of the Terrorgorger, a ship of desperate, greedy merchants, those would be the PCs, lands on this vampire coast in New Bekefen. They're there for a seemingly simple trade, delivering a rare and valuable wine called Bell Wine to a local vampire lord, Baron Charybdis. They're expecting a big payday, enough to eclipse the wealth of a Bretonnian prince, but of course things aren't going to go well, and soon those PCs will be on the run, lost in the jungle, and they need to make their way back to the ship before it leaves without them. This adventure is a combination of dungeon crawling, a wilderness sandbox, and some very dangerous encounters that require good tactics and role-playing with savvy. If surviving dinosaurs, vampires, and old world magic sounds interesting, well, ready your Zweihanders and prepare your spells, because not only am I going to give you a full overview of ROAR of the Terrorgorger, I'm going to give you GM some tips and tricks on how to run this adventure with all the savagery it deserves. But be warned, there are spoilers ahead, so if you think you might get a chance to play in this game, well, head back to your boat and send your GM this way instead. All right, here we go. ROAR of the Terrorgorger is an adventure for 4 to 6 players, and it typically takes a couple of sessions to get through. It starts out with a tight encounter, but then evolves into an open-ended jungle exploration game, so the adventure length really just depends on your group. The adventure begins shortly after the PCs land on the haunted coast of the continent of Lustria. They are merchants and scoundrels on a dangerous but lucrative mission: deliver rare bell wine to a vampire lord named Baron Charybdis. The bell wine, made far off in Bretonnia, is actually poisonous to vampires, but it makes the mortals who live in Lustria immune to all the continent's diseases. So it's valuable to the vampires because their human slaves are frequently dying from those diseases, so a little bell wine in their water will make them live longer and be better slaves. The instructions from Baron Charybdis says to dock their ship in New Bekefen and then head to the Gravesend Inn to arrange the delivery. This inn is sort of a safe place for deals and one of the few places in New Bekefen that the vampires aren't allowed to hunt. As the PCs walk through the town, you really have to kind of play up the misery of this place. It's the only town in Lustria where people live, but it's horrible. They'll see starving humans and elves working alongside shambling zombies, watched over by cruel, ghoulish overlords. Just walking through the streets should be rough and nightmarish and make the PCs really question whether they've made the right choice to come here and do this deal. Soon, Baron Charybdis arrives at the inn. The Baron is polite and confirms the deal for the bell wine and the payment. And if the PCs brought a bottle with them, he'll even admire it, but he won't drink it himself, instead having his mortal servant taste it. Remember, bell wine's poisonous to vampires. But then, at a dramatic moment, just when the players think the deal is done and they're off the hook, the tavern door splinters open and 5 skeletal warriors burst in, led by a woman named Nicole Morvant, a stunning vampire noble. She announces that Baron Charybdis's plot to overthrow Lord Harkon has been discovered, and she accuses him of using that bell wine to secretly build an army or even poison Lord Harkon himself. Nicole declares the Baron and his fellow conspirators, which now includes the PCs who are surprised by this turn of events, they're just caught in the middle of this thing, are guilty of treason and probably have to die. And suddenly outside the inn, tentacled monstrosities are summoned that block the exits. And if the PCs try to escape this way, they'll see the Baron himself try to climb out a window to get away, only to be grotesquely crushed and torn apart by one of those creatures. This is your first big signal that maybe running out of this tavern isn't the best plan. So you have a battle here and the players have to fight off the skeletons and find another way out. Fortunately, there's a boarded up trap door in the inn that leads to the catacombs beneath the place. The PCs now find themselves in a dungeon of sorts, catacombs, originally built as Gothic burial chambers, but, well, there's no remains now because the vampires would have turned anyone dead into zombies ages ago. But the catacombs connect to the lower levels of an ancient lizardman temple that was built here years ago. This section is really inspired by those old pulp jungle adventures. The temple is something you might find in an Indiana Jones movie or a Conan movie. It's just filled with traps and dangerous monsters and a little bit of weirdness, even though it's not that big. It's only about 8 rooms total to get through this dungeon. So the dungeon is really 2 parts. There's the catacombs, and then there's the ancient lizardman temple. There are lots of dangerous and weird rooms in this temple, ranging from passages filled with venomous adders, a sleeping, fire-breathing salamander asleep in a corridor, and a bizarre chamber with an ancient tablet dedicated to the serpent god Sotek, a tablet that can grant magical powers to those brave enough to touch it, but at the risk of driving them mad and incurring the wrath of Sotek, which involves summoning lots of venomous serpents. But eventually the PCs will emerge from the catacombs and find themselves in the primordial jungle of Lustria, about 2 miles west of New Becafen. Their only hope for escape from the vampire coast is to make their way back to town, sneak back in, and head back to their ship before it gives up on them and leaves. But surviving 2 miles in Lustria is, well, as they say in the old world, easier said than done, and more often ends with you halfway down the gullet of something big, scaly, and faster than a payday roomer at a Bogenhofen tavern. Bogenhofen merchants actually pay. I thought all they did was summon demons on a quarterly basis. This jungle trek is the second part of the adventure, and it's a wilderness sandbox. It's very open-ended. I make sure to pause and really describe to the players what a dangerous place the Lustrian jungle is. I talk about how it's a green hell of choking vines and lurking death, and how the air throbs with the distant roars of beasts that are too big to outrun, the hiss of serpents sliding under their feet just ready to bite, and 1,000 other perils that are waiting for them. Heck, even the vampires don't like to go into the jungle, but the PCs are going to need to cut a trail to get back to their ship. Now, you can run this section in a few ways. If you want a more straightforward adventure, you can simply hand the players the player-safe map and let them pick their path to get back to New Becafen. This works just fine. Or, if you're more of a traditionalist, you can run this as sort of a hex crawl. In this case, tell your players to pick the direction that they want to travel in, and then you make them make a roll. If you're using like a skill system game, then this is like a navigation roll. Or in D&D, it could be a wisdom check or even just a 50-50 chance. Because the PCs are deep in the jungle, I like to give a penalty to this roll and maybe another penalty if they're stupid enough to be traveling at night. Now, if they fail the roll, they drift in a random direction, and then you secretly make another roll to see if the players even know that they're lost. And if the players are lost, then you roll a die, and like on a roll of 1, they get attacked by some wandering monster like a skink patrol, some ripperdactyls.
Yeah, I got a sword. I got a flintlock pistol. There ain't no way a ripperdactyl's getting me.
Or even worse, Grottle, the famed Saurus warrior and his terrifying Carnosaur mount, Snarlslog. Grottle is a famed lizardman Saurus warrior who's sort of an advanced scout who's checking out the territory around New Becafen before his army attacks. So I like to use Grottle to herd the players away from the direction that they're heading in at some point in the adventure. Especially if your players are just trying to beeline back to New Becafen, you don't want to make that too easy for them. So you have this massive lizard man riding a T-Rex appear out of the jungle and chase them in a random direction. It's great to use him as sort of this monster that can like push the players around as they're trying to get back to town. There are many other encounters to be found in the wild. One route leads along a turbulent river called the Dreadwake in one area. There's a disrepaired rope bridge and steep cliffs where they might find the corpse of a dead Kislevites on a boulder in the river who carries a cursed totem and a letter. Rafting down the river is actually the quickest way to get back to New Becafen, but it's dangerous. The rapids can damage a makeshift raft, and the river is home to the dreaded Terroghorger at night. This massive, tentacled, squid-like monstrosity feeds on vampires and has drawn power from their blood, but it's also happy to eat the PCs. It's a tough fight fighting the Terroghorger, but if it's killed, its death causes a massive burst of necromantic energy that actually stuns all the lesser undead nearby, making it easier for the players to sneak back in town because the whole town will be just really shattered by the death of that creature. One of my favorite locations in the jungle is a clearing with ancient ruins. And this is where Lachlan Harkon, a curious vampire obsessed with not blood but ancient artifacts, is searching for archaeological secrets. He's not interested in local politics, but he does know about Grottle and can offer advice on how to navigate the jungle. If the PCs help him or trade a valuable artifact, like that tablet of Sotek they may have found in the Catacombs, he might write them a letter of passing, which will allow them back into New Becafen without questions asked. He also has a magical hatchet and healing ointments that he might be willing to trade in exchange for help breaking into a tomb that he's found. There's like a puzzle embedded in the bronze door of the tomb, and if the PCs can decipher it, it will lead them to a weird place called the Celestial Socket, a place where the PCs can unlock primordial magical power if they survive its traps and curses. Near the river, there are tall trees with ripperdactyl roosts, these angry winged lizards that hunt along the river, and at night, undead gauntbats fight the ripperdactyls for their valuable eggs, creating a commotion that could also potentially create a distraction for the PCs, but also might attract other predators. Basically, in every direction, there's lots of things for the players to discover. They won't find it all for sure. And even though the encounters are dangerous, they force players to make choices and take risks, not just force them into a standard combat encounter. But there are places where stupid mistakes could get your character grabbed and eaten by a flock of ripperdactyls. So it's dangerous, but survivable. And eventually the jungle trails will lead back to New Becafen. Getting back into the city requires some cleverness after all the vampires probably realize they've escaped by now, but there's lots of options to get back into the city and navigate to the docks. Perhaps the players got back fast enough that the vampires never really got a chance to send out a search party. Or maybe they can talk their way through the veteran Sylvanian crossbowmen guarding the bridge back to the city. Or maybe they got that letter of passing by helping Lachlan Harkon and can pass through with official permission. Or Maybe they noticed that Grottle and his lizardmen of Lustria were mounting an attack on the city, and they time the return exactly when the war drums start and the city's distracted by the siege of the lizardmen. Once the players reach the port, they have a final decision to return to their ship, hoping that it hasn't sailed away yet, or maybe sneak onto another merchant ship and get off the continent. Either way, they likely aren't safe yet, because not only is that vampire Nicole Morvant, along with her Graveguard, still looking for the PCs, but a devolved vampire lord, Stursel the Vargulf, a monstrous winged creature that craves blood, will be hunting the skies for them. So the conclusion likely sees the players sailing away while fighting off some of those undead lords of New Becafen. They've now transformed from mere merchants into grizzled survivors, and they've learned that in this world, danger lurks in every deal on the Vampire Coast, which is something they probably should have thought of to begin with. So that's a peek at Roar of the Terroghorger. It's really for groups that love challenge and danger in their fantasy adventures. The old world is grim and gritty, and so are the encounters in this adventure. I tried to capture a bit of that old school feel in this one, where players can end up way over their heads and may be in situations they may not be able to win. While not for everyone, I think this kind of adventure works really well to make your players feel real pressure and use their brains. For GMs who haven't run this kind of adventure before, there are some guardrails that I like to suggest, just so your players don't feel like it's totally unfair. First, remember that the bad guys are also in this very dangerous world, and roleplay them that way. If the players cut down a lizardman captain right in front of his friends, the other lizardmen should pause for a turn, rethinking their strategy, or some of them might even run away. Reward your players for clever tactics, play the villains realistically against those tactics, and don't have the bad guys just always charge in and fight to the death. Second, make sure you take a moment to describe the danger in a little more detail than you normally would. If the players turn a corner and find themselves staring at a fire-belching salamander, describe how its fiery breath can melt someone's bones. Talk about how its tail is powerful enough to cripple a horse in one blow. Then your players will realize that any missteps will be costly, and they might just rethink their own typical RPG behavior, where they just scream, roll initiative, and attack haphazardly, and get themselves instantly killed in the process. So play your foes more smartly and realistically, and warn your players about the danger, and then you'll be able to run a thrilling, dangerous adventure on the deadly Vampire Coast. Oh, and if one of your players does get horribly killed, that's okay, just have a backup character ready to go. Maybe one of the vampire's slaves has recently escaped into the jungle, finds the party, and begs for help escaping Lustria, where they can like and subscribe this video from the safety of a Middenheim tavern. If you get a chance to play or run Roar of the Terroghorger, let me know how it went in the comments below. I would love to hear about all of your crazy jungle adventures. It really helps me make my adventures better. Until next time, I'm JC, and just remember, on the Vampire Coast, sometimes the wine trade is a little more dangerous than you think. Oh, hey, it's me again. Just so you know, there really isn't any such thing as Skaven. Please don't start rumors, or they might come for us.